This is help for homework 4, problem 1, programming the password protect function. What I want to do is go over, earlier in class, I went over some steps, laid out some steps to sort of ways to think about coding and really to separate the actual putting stuff in the computer from how do you think about the problem. And so if you see here for these 6 steps, steps 1 through 3 really deal with reading the problem, roughing out a solution, and this is any way you want to. You can write it down, you can use sticky notes, or act it out, however you want to do it, just so you get your head around what's going on with the problem. And a lot of times you have to read the problem a lot to do this, so you go back and forth between step 1 and 2. And then once you sort of get and rough out a solution, then you have to turn that into a step-by-step solution. And that takes a minute. But when you do that, use your examples to test. As I have here under 2, the examples can also be helpful to sort of work backwards, if you will, to think about the problem and to get an understanding. So I think looking at these 5 homework problems, that the issue with a lot of them is trying to figure out just what's being asked and then trying to figure out how to do it. And so what I'm going to try to do is step you through that to keep myself from writing any code that would help you solve the problem. I'm just going to stick with this whiteboard application and write out stuff by hand. And so we'll see that in a second. So what I'm going to focus on are steps 1, 2, and 3, reading through the problem, roughing a draft solution, maybe get into some step-by-step. But if I think I take you that far and we get to that part, then taking it on all the way and writing the code and testing the code and that kind of thing will be easier. So these are the kind of drills that we're going to go through. All right, so with this problem here, let's look at the problem. First of all, what's sort of nice is they do give us inputs and outputs. So you say read the problem. Well, if you notice in most of the homework, they give us inputs and they give us outputs. Now, this is not always true in the real world. But this is very nice for these homework problems. They've given us inputs and outputs, and we're going to have to sort of rely on, then the puzzle solving starts, as we have to rely on our ability to figure stuff out, to figure out if there's any domain knowledge we need, if there are any givens, apparent or hidden givens that we need to solve the problem. And so this is where it gets tricky, but quite frankly, this is where it gets exciting because it's a puzzle in some senses. So reading through this, I can save you the first part of this problem. A lot of it is really just setting it up. It is entertaining and some would say comical, but this whole part about the society and hacking and preventing you becoming from a victim, Georgia Tech rolling out its 2-factor, the password won't be required, Pi, firstborn child, all of this is sort of not relevant to figuring out what you need to do. And so what is relevant is you're going to use MATLAB to create a function to check whether or not a certain password meets requirements, and if it does, you return true, and if not, you return false. So let's go back up here and say, okay, they're going to give us some string representing the user's password. We're going to call that PWD here in my example, but then we're going to output some Boolean string, and let's just call that, I'm going to call it ANS, meaning the answer. So we get in this password, this PWD here, and we're going to check it against some criteria and get ANS. So the question becomes, what are those criteria? I'll do that by highlighting here. So we have to have at least 8 characters. We have to have at least 1 lowercase letter. We have to have at least 1 uppercase letter, and we have to have at least 1 number, and we also have to have 1 special character. Okay, and then the note down here sort of gives us, this note down here gives us some definition of special character, anything that's not a letter or a number. And so let's go through these one by one. If we have to test for at least 8 characters, and I'm going to try to do this graphically here. This may get a little messy, but if you go with me step by step, you'll get it. So let's say at least 8 characters. Well, how do we test for 8 characters? Well, if we have a string, then that would probably be the length of our password. All right, and then I have to test for that to be 8 characters or not. So let me go back here and erase this. And let's do this a little better. The way I'm thinking about this is you take all these tests. So let's say if you call this test 1 and this test 2 and this test 3 and this test 4 and this one test 5, then quite frankly our answer, get rid of this arrow. Oh, I just erased everything. Boo. Control Z gets it back. But quite frankly, our answer is going to equal test 1 and test 2 and test 3 and test 4 and test 5. Or likewise, I could have said all test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, and test 5. Okay, so now breaking the problem down, we just got to do each test, right? Okay, so let's look at each test. Come here and go test 1. And so before I do that, well, I guess you could do it this way. So if we do test 1 equals, now keep in mind test 1 is going to be a logical, so we've got to set up some kind of a logical expression over here. So test 1 is going to equal to, I'm going to test the length, the length of our password and see if that is greater than or equal to 8. All right. Really straightforward. Test 2, we're going to test for lowercase. A lot of ways you can do this, but if we're going to use the ASCII way, then we a lot of ways we can do it. Think the way off the top of my head, I would maybe convert my password to uint8. So this is going to look long, but you'll get it. So let's see, we go uint8, convert my password to uint8, and once I do that, I want to see if I'm checking for uppercase, and actually this is test 3. Well, I'll do test 2. If I'm checking for uppercase or lowercase, lowercase, I'm going to check to make sure it's greater than or equal to 97, and it has to be uint8 of pwd has to be less than or equal to 122, which is lowercase z, I believe. Okay, so I check for that. Now what I can do to check the whole string at one time is I do that and I do a find. So find all the places that is true, and if the length of this is greater, the length of this, shrink this a bit, move it over, the length of this is greater than 0, then the string does contain a value that is lowercase, or a character that is lowercase. All right, so put this in MATLAB, check it out. I may have missed some punctuation, but you get the idea, and keep in mind what I'm trying to do is give you an idea. Next up, I'm not going to do T3, which is the uppercase, because you got that. That's the same thing. Just change the range from 97 to 122 to the uppercase range. And then also likewise for T4, change the range to the digit range, which starts at digit 0, character digit 0, and character digit all the way up to character digit 9. So do those. And then T5 really is not that difficult. You can do something similar. It's just that now inside of here, inside of this, what you're finding here, it gets a little bit longer, because keep in mind, if it's not a number or not an uppercase or lowercase letter, then it can be less than 48, right? But then it has to be greater than 57, right? Because the digits end at 56, I believe. Wait a minute. Yeah, has to be greater than 57 and less than 65, because that's the space between where the digits end here and where the password, excuse me, the uppercase characters begin here. So that's between the end of the digits and the beginning of the uppercase characters, right? So it can be there, or it can be, you have to account for the space between the, so here you'd have to count for the space between the upper and lower case letters. And then once you do that, then anything greater than lowercase z, right? And so you OR all those together. All right. So this one, sort of in sketching out this algorithm, it's sort of, we did it in a step-by-step fashion. This is a relatively straightforward problem because when you're going from steps 2 to 3, step 2 you sort of did step by step, and so step 3 sort of wound up being step by step. So hopefully you can take all this chicken scratch here and turn it into an answer for your for homework for problem 1. Hope this was helpful, and I'll come back with another video for homework for problem 2.